Look at this, it's actually glowing.
Wow, it is absolutely stunning. It's pure magic.
I can't believe it, we actually found it.
It's actually real, isn't it?
I told you it was real, Mommy.
Then the freight elevator opened. Soren Halden, a single father from building restoration, rolled out a battered wooden case that belonged to Vesper's late father. Inside was a brass star projector nobody had seen in 12 years. But Soren's real surprise waited beyond the locked rooftop doors, and it would force Vesper to decide whether solitude was still protection or simply a habit grief had taught her. Before we continue, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? At 6:30 on a wet October evening, Vesper Marlowe sent the final assistant home. The 35-year-old CEO watched the elevator doors close, then turned her bronze-framed wheelchair toward the empty glass conference room. A small lemon cake waited at one end of the table. Her chief of staff had left it despite clear instructions. No candles, no flowers, no company-wide message. That was how Vesper wanted her birthday. She ran Marlowe Civic, a design and engineering firm that restored libraries, theaters, and public halls across the Northeast. Her name appeared on buildings where strangers gathered every day. Yet birthdays inside her own headquarters had become unbearable. Before the highway collision that injured her spinal cord, people had argued with her, surprised her, and forgotten to hold doors. Afterward, every gesture seemed carefully softened. Invitations came with speeches about courage. Cakes arrived beside photographers. Even affection felt rehearsed. So Vesper had stopped giving anyone an audience. 4 floors below, Soren Halden was removing 80 years of paint from a narrow brass hinge. He supervised restoration maintenance inside the Meridian building, the company's 1920s headquarters. At 39, Soren had a compact, powerful carpenter's build and hands marked by old cuts. He raised his 10-year-old daughter, Lark, in a small apartment above a neighborhood hardware store. That afternoon, Lark had been doing homework at his workshop bench when she found the wooden case. It sat behind a wall panel removed during a scheduled electrical inspection. The case was blackened at one corner, bound with tarnished brass, and small enough to carry under one arm. A faded paper star was tucked beneath its handle. Soren had photographed it where it lay and checked the building archive before moving it. The inventory number led to one line: Celestial Projector, Handmade, Elias Marlowe, Rooftop Conservatory, Vesper's father. Elias had founded the company in a rented drafting room. He died 12 years earlier, weeks before Vesper's 24th birthday. The rooftop conservatory had closed soon afterward because its narrow service steps and warped doors made access unsafe. Soren should have logged the case and gone home. Instead, Lark lifted the loose paper star. On its back, in faded pencil, was a child's drawing of a wheelchair beneath a night sky. Beside it was an unfinished ramp made of ruler lines. "Did she draw this?" Lark asked. Soren studied the initials in one corner. VM. He called the facilities director, reported the discovery, and asked permission to stabilize the object. The answer came with a warning. The board planned to vote the following week on selling the building. No one wanted money spent on a sentimental room upstairs. Soren used only conservation supplies already assigned to the Meridian project. Lark cleaned 12 glass star slides with cotton swabs. Soren repaired a split oak gear housing and replaced a missing leather drive belt with one cut from an archival sample. The brass mechanism turned, but the lamp would not hold current. Inside its base, Soren found a second surprise: a folded plan for the rooftop conservatory. Elias had marked a level route from the freight elevator, wider doors, and a low circular viewing rail. It was not a fantasy sketch. The dimensions matched the building. Someone had started ordering the hardware before Elias died. Most of it was still stored in the basement. For 9 days, Soren worked through the proper chain. The facilities director approved use of the already budgeted safety repairs. A building engineer checked the route. An accessibility consultant verified clearances. Nothing was hidden from the company, but the details stayed away from Vesper because the board had assigned her no role in routine preservation work. By her birthday, the rooftop was safe enough to enter again. The projector was not finished. Its final brass lens ring had vanished. Soren searched every drawer in the old drafting room. Lark studied the paper star until she noticed a circle pressed into its center. The impression matched a small brass ring on a framed portrait in the lobby, a decorative piece everyone assumed was part of the frame. Vesper had walked past it for 12 years. Soren removed nothing without written approval. The conservator released the ring after confirming it belonged to the projector. It fit perfectly. At 7:15, Soren stood inside the freight elevator with the restored wooden case. Lark waited beside him in a navy raincoat, holding the paper star flat between both hands. "What if she wants to be alone?" Lark asked. "Then we give her the case and leave. A surprise isn't permission to corner someone." The elevator opened onto the executive floor. Across the silent office, Vesper sat beside the untouched lemon cake. Her expression hardened when she saw Soren. Then she noticed the scorched corner of the wooden case. One hand slipped from her wheel. "Where did you find that?" she asked. Soren set the case on the nearest low table and stepped back. "Inside the west service wall. If you tell us to go, we go. But I thought you should see what was inside tonight." He opened the lid. The brass stars began to turn. Tiny points of light moved across the dark conference room ceiling. Vesper did not speak. The pattern was imperfect. One star trembled because a glass slide had a hairline crack. Another drifted out of line whenever the leather belt crossed its old seam. But she recognized the constellations. Her father had built the projector for evenings in the rooftop conservatory. When Vesper was a child, he let her choose one new star for every birthday. The last empty opening in the brass drum had been meant for her 24th. He died before filling it. Vesper rolled closer to the wooden case. She touched the lens ring with 2 fingers. This was on his portrait. Soren nodded. The conservator confirmed it was part of the original assembly. Lark held out the faded paper star but did not approach until Vesper invited her. Vesper turned it over. Her own childish drawing looked back at her. A wheelchair beneath a night sky, connected to the conservatory by a careful ramp. She had drawn it after one of her father's architects began using a chair following an illness. Elias had promised that the rooftop would belong to everyone. Vesper had forgotten. "The room is still closed," she said. "The old stair is," Soren replied. "The level route from the freight elevator passed inspection this afternoon. The engineer allowed a limited entry, only if you want it." Vesper looked toward the elevator. Suspicion arrived before hope. "Who is waiting up there?" "Not the press. No board members. No photographer." "That wasn't my question." Soren met her eyes. "A few people who asked to help. If you want an empty room, they'll leave before we arrive." The answer mattered. He had planned a surprise without taking away her choice. Vesper looked at the lonely cake, then at the paper star in Lark's hands. "Show me the route." The freight elevator rose 1 floor. Its rear doors opened onto a corridor Vesper had never used. The threshold was level. The new door hardware sat at wheelchair height. Brass guardrails followed the old brick wall without pretending to be antique. Soren had preserved the building instead of disguising access as an apology. At the far end, a pair of restored glass doors opened into the rooftop conservatory. Rain moved across the panes. Low amber lights traced a circular floor. The old telescope remained under a canvas cover, and the city shimmered beyond the wet glass. Only 6 people waited. An elderly librarian from the first building Vesper had saved from demolition, a young engineer whose internship she had funded anonymously, a theater custodian who had once challenged her about an inaccessible balcony and watched her redesign the entire route, 2 retired draftsmen who had worked beside Elias, and the night receptionist who brought tea exactly the way Vesper liked it, but never mentioned knowing her birthday. No one made a speech. They were there because Soren had asked each person for one memory of a place Vesper helped preserve. Those memories had been recorded as quiet audio notes for later, not performed in front of her. On the central table sat 6 repaired objects: a library card drawer, a brass theater number, a cracked drafting triangle, an old ceramic tile, a wooden handrail sample, and a child's paper star. The gifts were not expensive. They were evidence that her work had lived beyond contracts. Vesper's control slipped. She turned her chair toward the rain-black windows before anyone could see her face. Soren did not follow. He stayed beside Lark and gave Vesper the distance to choose what happened next. After a long minute, Vesper returned to the circle. "You can uncover the telescope," she told one of the retired draftsmen. That was the beginning of the evening. They ate the lemon cake on mismatched archive plates. Lark demonstrated the projector and admitted that one trembling star was her fault because she had tightened the slide too quickly. Vesper laughed before she could stop herself. Soren heard the sound and looked away too late. There was no pity in his expression, only relief. Later, while the others examined the city through breaks in the rain, Vesper joined him near the low viewing rail. How much did this cost? The safety route was already in the preservation budget. The projector used shop material and volunteer time. "I kept receipts." "Of course you did. I enjoy remaining employed." Her smile faded. "The board wants to sell this building." Soren had heard the same rumor. The Meridian needed expensive masonry work, and a developer had offered to convert it into private residences. The board believed the company could move into a glass tower with easier maintenance. Vesper had not opposed the sale. She told herself sentiment should not guide a CEO. Now she saw her father's unfinished route shining beneath practical new lights. "Did you restore this to change my vote?" she asked. Soren's face tightened. "No, that would make the birthday a manipulation. I restored it because the plans were valid, the repair was approved, and a room built for people had been locked for 12 years. Your vote is your business." Vesper believed him, because the answer cost him the chance to influence her. Then the wind shifted. Water began to drip from the conservatory's eastern beam. Soren moved at once. He cleared the table, marked the wet floor, and asked everyone to return through the safe corridor. The leak exposed a rusted seam above the old telescope. The room was not ready to reopen permanently. Vesper watched the beautiful surprise empty in less than 2 minutes. For once, the disappointment did not feel like abandonment. It felt like a problem that could be solved. The next morning, Vesper postponed the building vote. She did not save the Meridian because of one emotional night. She commissioned an independent structural survey, a full accessibility review, and 2 financial comparisons: sale versus phased public restoration. The results were complicated. The Eastern Conservatory beam needed replacement. The masonry would take 3 years to stabilize. Keeping the headquarters would cost more than moving, but historic tax credits and event leases could cover much of the difference. The rooftop could become a public design archive instead of a private executive room. Vesper presented all 3 options to the board without mentioning her birthday. Soren submitted his maintenance evidence through the facilities director. He did not attend the vote. Lark had a school science exhibition, and he had promised to help carry her cardboard planetarium. The board approved a phased restoration by 1 vote. The decision came with oversight, spending limits, and quarterly public reports. It was not a romantic rescue. It was a defensible plan. Vesper preferred it that way. The rooftop remained closed through winter. Soren's team documented the old steel, repaired the drainage system, and removed the damaged beam under an engineer's supervision. The brass star projector stayed in Vesper's office, where she sometimes switched it on after difficult meetings. One trembling star still crossed her ceiling. She refused to let Soren fix it. "It has character," she told him. "It has a loose retaining clip." Character? Their conversations grew easier, then more dangerous in the quiet way honest conversations sometimes do. Vesper learned that Soren drank coffee cold because he always forgot it near a workbench. He learned she could identify 6 kinds of stone by sound, but could not keep basil alive. Lark began leaving small paper constellations in the projector case, each with a new imaginary name. Still, Soren kept a boundary. He worked on her building. She led the company that paid his salary. Whatever he felt stayed behind professional courtesy. Vesper noticed that restraint more than she would have noticed flirting. In March, a national conservation cooperative offered Soren a senior field position. It paid better and let him choose projects closer to Lark's school. He accepted after the Meridian beamwork passed inspection. His departure surprised Vesper. "You didn't ask me to match the offer," she said when he came to return his building keys. "I didn't want the answer confused with anything else." The meaning settled between them. Vesper turned the brass keyring once around her finger. "And now I no longer work for you. That is a fact, not a plan." Soren smiled. "Dinner then, if you'd like one." Vesper made him wait 3 seconds. "I would." They did not become a family overnight. Soren's life was built around school pickups, work boots by the door, and a child who asked direct questions at inconvenient moments. Vesper's life included travel, pain that changed without warning, and public decisions that followed her home. They learned each other's pace. Soren never moved Vesper's wheelchair without asking. Vesper never treated his limited time as a scheduling failure. Lark discovered that the CEO was terrible at making pancakes and excellent at repairing cardboard architecture with drafting tape. By the following October, the Meridian Rooftop Conservatory was ready for a limited public opening. The low viewing rail followed Elias's original plan. The freight elevator route remained clear. Adjustable tables allowed children and adults to use the star slides from different heights. The old telescope had been stabilized, not polished into something new. Vesper refused a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Instead, the first visitors were 12 children from the neighborhood library. Lark guided them around the projector, while Soren stood beside the restored eastern beam, checking rain sensors out of habit. Vesper watched from the center of the room. She still used the same bronze-framed wheelchair. The story had not transformed her body to prove her life was full. It had changed the room around her, and, more slowly, the rules she had built around her heart. When the children left, Soren produced a familiar white box. Inside was a small lemon cake. "No staff announcement," he said. "No photographer. No speech." Lark placed one candle in the center. "One rule," Vesper said. "The projector stays on." They dimmed the conservatory lights. Brass gears began to turn. Stars moved across the glass ceiling, including the trembling one Vesper had protected all year. Soren sat on the low bench beside her, rather than standing over her chair. Lark leaned against his shoulder. Beyond the windows, the city shone through a clear autumn night. Vesper closed her eyes long enough to make a wish. When she opened them, she did not look at the candle. She looked at the people who had stayed after she gave them permission to leave. Then she reached for Soren's hand. This time, being seen did not feel like being displayed. It felt like coming home.